This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Football Odyssey. This is your host, Aaron Harris. Joining me on today's episode is Jordan Abbot, the secondary coach at Butler Community College. In our conversation, Jordan walks me through his days playing high school football, his transition to coaching, the experience of coaching junior college football, and his defensive philosophy. Any coach or player will surely appreciate Coach Abbott's journey thus far, and if you'd like to follow his insights on football, I've attached a link to his Twitter account in the description. I hope you all enjoy our conversation, and if so, feel free to subscribe and share. As always, thank you for listening, and now enjoy the show. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Coach Jordan Abbot. How are you, Coach?
I'm good, man. Good. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. How did spring ball go for you?
Not ideal. Not a typical Butler season for us. Had a very young defense and we were not very good on the D-line this year. So that kind of hurt us. We had a couple guys, 2 or 3 guys, key players that would have been for us on the D-line that opted out, or they were due to COVID, or they came up just not healthy or whatnot. So it was like, okay, well that really hurt. And so we ended up having about 10 out of the 11 starters were, either true freshmen or redshirt freshmen that had never seen snaps. So it was a bit of a learning curve this spring season. But we've already hit the recruiting trail pretty hard and got some dudes coming in for the fall. So hopefully we'll reload that way and be ready to rock and roll in the fall. So.
How do you typically approach spring football? I mean, do you kind of look at it as like a blueprint for like what scheme and you're going to run in the fall, or is it kind of like to knock the rust off and maybe correct some things from last year?
It's more experimentation, than anything. I mean, yeah, you're grooming your guys to find out, who's going to be the dude, who's going to be new, especially because JUCO, you're turning over a brand new team every year. So half your team's gone, right after your fall season. So in a typical year when we're in spring ball, we're putting them through 5 a.m. workouts. We're putting them through weightlifting, and they're adding weight. They're getting bigger. We're teaching them to move with that new weight they put on their body. But when it comes to just schematics and everything, we are who we are. We're going to run what we do. But springtime is when we experiment a little bit. So like if I like a new coverage that I've kind of seen through, the NCAA or FBS or FCS teams that I like, I'm thinking, okay, well maybe we can implement that here. That's the time we try it out to see if our kids can grasp it, if they can run with it, and if they're comfortable in it. If they are, then we keep it. If not, then, we check it out, because what we do right now is pretty good.
Where do you get ideas from particularly? I mean, you just said that you watch like NCAA. Are there certain teams that you watch?
I always go, and I mean, I'm a big Nick Saban fan. Like, I know I've heard horror stories about Nick as far as like, what it's like to work for him and all that. But, however you want to slice it up, the man is really good at what he does. And I don't think anybody can argue that. But I like looking at some because like his Cover One package is up online. You can go see a lot of that stuff. Now, obviously you don't get into every little thing he does, but some of the concepts he has online, and you're like, he's got one thing, I can't remember what it's called. It's Mod 7 or Mod 77, whatever. It's basically one of these coverages we run now, so everything that you think you've thought of or but a lot of things are recycled in football. So, you think you found something new. Well, hell, Alabama's been running that for years, and it's just like, well, okay, that's fine. But I mean, so you go there, you look at, you try and hit up some contacts, go hang out with some, Division I coaches, pick their brains about some things, get on the phone with them, and just kind of, try and find some kind of inspiration, just something that's not going to be overly taxing. That's the one thing, Alabama, staying in that same vein, they have so many checks for short motion, for a cross motion, for, the fullback lined up here. So they have checks for every single thing. I mean, they should, they get paid millions of dollars, but at the end of the day, we're junior college system. We overload our kids like that. And it's, we don't want to overload our kids at all. So we want them to play fast. So when they don't have to think as much, it's go fast, play fast, and they can do what they do, so.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like that's kind of like the price of brilliance in a way, where it's going to be hard to have to work for a coach. But I mean, what he's doing now, I mean, has been like 20 or 30 years in the making when he was in Cleveland too, like the pattern matching and everything like that. So it's amazing that now it's kind of starting to catch on to everybody else.
Right.
And he's been doing it and perfecting it and trying to find the next best thing too.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's one of the things I think when he goes and hires people, he wants out of the box thinkers, or he wants guys that have been head coaches elsewhere and they've amassed some kind of a knowledge to bring to the table for him, and I think that's part of the reason why he is where he is and he has done what he's done, because he's always finding new ways to implement it and new techniques, new whatever, fundamentals, techniques, whatever, and teaching it to these kids, and they're just rolling over people every time. So.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure as a coach too. I mean, you've been coaching for the better part of 10, 15 years now.
Yep, 16, I think, right now. So yeah.
So it has to be a lot easier to get knowledge nowadays than it's ever been with the internet and sites like Huddle and stuff like that. Yeah.
It is, but you'd be surprised. Some coaches are very stingy. I mean,
I can imagine.
Football's football, and but nobody wants to give away their secrets. So like, when we go to these conventions and you'll go to and you hear some guys speak, some of them are great. You go in there and they'll give you, but football's football. Defense is defense, one way or another, however you slice it. Cover 3 is cover 3. Cover 2 is cover 2. And everybody's got different little tweaks to it here and there. But, some of them are great. Some of them will give you the whole thing. They don't care because they understand football is football. A lot of people get lost in the terminology. It's like and that's what I always try and tell our kids when they leave. I said, once you pick up the terminology, you're going to realize that, mod 77 is basically void up for us. And they go, oh yeah, that's all it is. It's just a different name. Everything's the same. But then some of these guys, you go in there and they're not giving you anything. They'll just give you some drills and stuff like that. But, it's not as bad. It's not as bad now, but you can kind of see where it goes. But
yeah, I've always wondered like where the fine line is, because I've spoken to a couple coaches since like starting this show, and it seems to me like, they're always willing to give a lot of good pointers and some different coverages, but you always kind of wonder, well, from a competitive standpoint, do you want to give too much? Because then people use it against you.
Right. Well, if they know, and that's part of it. So if they know exactly what your rules are, they know how to beat you. So that's the biggest thing. And so some of the guys, but like I said, cover 2 is cover 2. Everybody knows how to play. Any college coach or coordinator on offense knows how to beat cover 2. You attack the middle, you attack the whole shot on the sidelines. You try and get that crease between the linebackers and the safeties. But I mean, it's just different. Like you said, there's a fine line, but if they have a specific coverage, like with our void up, it's like, okay, well, maybe we don't want to tell everybody exactly how our rules are, because the moment you know the rules, you know how to beat it. But I mean, it's just, yeah, you're right. It's more of a competitive thing than anything.
Yeah, it kind of turns into that sort of like, I know that you know that I know sort of deal.
Right.
And do you do a lot of 7-on-7 in the off season too?
We do a little bit. Our kids have to be technically enrolled if we're going to be out there and do drills with them. But a lot of our guys this year, it's like go home, just because they literally just finished up on the 22nd of May, and June classes start, I think, on the 7th. So some of them will be back for summer school. A majority of them, we're just saying, hey, go home, rest up. As long as you're eligible and everything like that, then we'll come back in last weekend of July and we'll get rolling. But in that point in time, in the off season, it's just like, okay, because we're not technically allowed to be out there and all that stuff. So it's just kind of, hey, they come into the office. Hey, what do you want to see today? Let's just keep it basic. Run this, and this. Offense is going to run their plays, and you guys just go out there and have fun, So, and you're sitting there as a coach kind of looking out the window, just kind of watching it as you can, because you can't be there, but you can, distance, you just want to kind of sit there and watch them and see how they go. So.
Got your binoculars out?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Go sit in a press box somewhere and just kind of watch, and, where you can't have any interaction with them.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy how, because I guess in college you can't really go to 7-on-7 camps, right? Like high school does.
No, we can't. But the nice thing is now they lifted the deal. So like when they actually have individual high school camps, for like a K-State or KU or Florida State and Florida, our guys, can go and can participate in that now. So now it's kind of a little, as long as they're not getting banged, and we always tell our guys, like, don't get banged up, don't, do the full padded ones or anything like that, but go and get your exposure. Let these guys look at you, let them see you in person. So, and they can put you through drills. They can give you kind of like a little tryout so they can kind of see, okay, I like this kid. I like how he moves. He's got some good fundamental skills. He's got some good one-on-ones, stuff like that. Just, it's another form of recruiting for them. So, but it's also a good thing for us to get our kids out there and let them run.
Yeah, I could see that. Because for me, I think 7-on-7 started taking off when I was in high school, but now it's become like almost a sport in and of itself. It's crazy to think about. I mean, I don't know if that's something you had to do when you were in high school, but it just kind of seems like, I mean, there's even like a league now that's just pure 7-on-7.
Right. And I think there's pros and cons to it, obviously, like anything. And when I was in high school, we did 7-on-7 because we were so used to seeing, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, because our former head coach at the time was Brent Hall, and that was his motto. He was going to run the football, and Forrest back in the day was just running the football, and Vanguard would air it out a little bit with Coach Castaneda. But some of these, it was the start of people were starting to air the ball out, and so we had to start, as a defense, we had to start doing some 7-on-7s, but it was nothing like it is now. Like there's a kid I'm recruiting out here in Kansas, and he's never in school. And it's a miracle that, he's like, oh, coach, he was down in Houston, he was down in Dallas, he was over here. And I'm just like, dude, when do you go to school? Cause he's on one of those travel teams. And I'm like, no wonder you might have to go junior college. You're never in school. You don't have, when do you find the time? It's just, so like, I don't agree with it if it's going to pull him out of school all the time. And but then the other thing that's lost on it is, it's almost like it's a basketball game more than it's a football game at that point. Yeah, you're still learning coverages and you're still learning drops and learning how to read receivers and quarterbacks, which is huge for defensive backs and linebackers. But at the end of the day, you still got to remember, you got to stop the run first, so, there's a certain violence to our game that makes it unique. And, if you lose touch with that, then, that's not going to be good for you as a defense anyway, so.
Yeah, it's kind of like doing like light sparring if you're a boxer and then having to go into a full match. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So you and I are from the same hometown of Ocala, Florida. And you were born in Ocala, right?
I was born and raised.
Cool. Did you start playing football at MCYFL?
No, actually, I didn't start until I guess I was in middle school, at St. John. And, that's when I was allowed to start playing. My mom was she was kind of concerned about MCYFL. She always felt like it was, if you're, you're still growing and you didn't want to get hurt or anything like that. Now, she was more concerned about my brother than she was me, because when my brother was growing up, he was really slender. So like, he was tall. He's 6'6", but he was super slender. He was a skinny guy. Great athlete, but just so my mom was just terrified that he was going to get broken playing football. Me, I was kind of a pudgy kid, so she wasn't really worried about me getting hurt, but she kind of made the whole deal. If you want to go, you can start in, middle school and go from there. So, I started there and I did some JV stuff, because if I transferred out, because they try to move you up to varsity, so you have to stay at St. John, because if you transfer, if you play in varsity, there was some weird rule. If you played varsity when I was in middle school, then I would have to sit like a year of eligibility at the high school level, because I'd already played, in middle school or something like that. It was something weird between public and private school. And
okay.
so I always stayed JV, and they kept trying to bump me up. And I got to the point one day I said, no, I'm not going to high school here. I'm leaving after middle school. And then I went to Bellevue. So. But.
What was it that kind of like drove you to it? Was it sort of like, did you have friends that had done it and you want to give it a shot?
Yeah, you always hear about friends in middle school and guys that play, MCYFL and all this and Pop Warner, and, it's like, oh, this is so much fun. And we had friends that we were growing up with that they played MCYFL and they were good little football players and stuff, but, you're in Florida, so football is football. Basketball is great, baseball is good, but, it's just like in Texas. I mean, there's no other sport that compares to it. In Florida, it's just, that's what you want to play. You grow up wanting to play football, and that's what I always wanted to do. So, as a little kid, you always have dreams, NFL dreams and this, that, and the other, but it's like, then reality hits you, but it didn't change your passion for the game. It doesn't change that you want to play it. So.
Who did you root for as a kid?
I've always been a diehard Bucks fan. My grandfather was always a Bucks fan. And he kind of got me onto it. And this is when they were in the orange and the red, just ugly, the yucks,
Yeah.
And so I was doing, and I actually did a little history lesson with them. I saw some little documentary on them when they were like when they first started up and they were like 26-1, and they finally got over that hump. It took them 2 years and, but I've always been a Bucks fan. And so like I was loving it when, and when we got Tom Brady, which, and I've rooted against Tom Brady for so long, but then, at first, cause it's like that damn Tom Brady, he's just so good. And then finally it was more of a respect and, you're like, well, he's just that good. You can't knock the man. And then he came to the Bucks and all the controversy of, well, is Belichick the best coach or Tom's the puppet or is Tom just that good? And turns out Tom's that damn good. So he can sling it still. So I was super excited. We were out, my wife and I were out with some friends and when the playoffs were going on, we're out hanging out and they're having drinks and stuff. I literally have my phone. I'm wearing my John Lynch Bucks jersey and I'm watching on my phone as this goes off and I'm just jumping up and screaming when they're doing good and when they're playing Green Bay and they're just looking at me like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, it's the Bucks, man. They're, so, but yeah, the Bucks have always been my team. So.
Well, yeah. And you kind of became a fan right when they were turning the corner, when they really started turning that franchise around. I mean, yeah, they had Lynch, Sapp, Allstott came in. I mean, They had like a team that was really, and who was the quarterback before, Dilfer, Sean King?
Sean King was one of them, and then they eventually got Brad Johnson in there too. So he was part of it. But yeah, and, I think that's who it was. And then, I think Dilfer was the one that was at quarterback whenever. It was him or Brad Johnson that won.
It was Brad Johnson. Yeah. The year before was, Dilfer with, what's it called? Or 2 years before with the Ravens.
Yep. How to Win Ugly.
Yeah.
Remember that. That was good. And yeah. So that was really good. But yeah, Dilfer was a big one. Then they got Brad in there and then they had Michael Pittman, who was just a massive running back. And yeah, I remember the Rhino backfield. They had Lorenzo Neal, and Allstott that would line up behind him. I was just like, who's stopping that? Who wants it? No, nobody wants that.
The elephant package.
Oh yeah. And then, that defense was just so solid. Brooks was probably one of my favorite players because he's a Florida State guy. I went to Florida State and diehard Seminole and, you just watch that guy just go out there and he was still just tearing everybody up and he's only 6 foot, 230 pounds and he's lighting people up and people are calling him Mr. Brooks, not Derek, but Mr. Brooks, so it was impressive. So.
I think one of my favorite rivalries, and it's kind of underrated, I guess it didn't last that long, but was the Bucks Rams from the early 2000s when they had Kurt Warner and Marshall Faulk. Those games were unbelievable. And, Kurt Warner's like said it, I knew what defense they were going to run every single time, but I still couldn't stop it. I still couldn't move past it. And that's what's amazing about it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's just, and that's why I kind of love where I'm at right now as far as junior college. And the kids are like, well, what if they do this? I say, who gives a damn if they know what we're calling? Who cares? I mean, they got to beat you. If they can't beat you, it doesn't matter. We could run cover 2 all day. But if their athletes aren't better than ours and we are assignment sound and we do our job, then we know exactly where the ball's got to go and they're not going to beat us. So, I mean, that's the nice thing about it. So.
Did you play defense in high school?
I did. I played a lot. I played everything. Primarily I was on offense. For a while I played fullback for us at Bellevue because we were a running team. So I ended up, I would go block for, our 2 tailbacks were, Cody Wells and Chris Ginyard, so it was, and Cody was kind of more of a thunder, but he had some speed, and then Ginyard was the lightning man. He could chop it up and go and he was a smaller guy, so he could hide behind all of us. And, so those are my guys that I would block for. And then, my junior and senior year a little bit, they played me. There was a couple games where I didn't come off the field. And then finally our head coach said, no, he's done with that. I got to get him to focus on offense and stay on offense because we need him here. And they found another guy to play the position I was at. But I'll never forget those were some tiring nights where you really find out what a second wind is.
Yeah.
Whew, that was rough. And, but it was interesting. I had a big old chunk taken out of my knee, at the top of my kneecap. And, you know, it was probably about the size of a dime, just gash. And I had no idea it even happened. I don't know how it happened. Don't know what had happened. My body had just gone numb after the second quarter. Couldn't feel anything because I was so exhausted.
Yeah, there's like a certain out of body experience that happens midway through when you don't even feel pain anymore just from going so long.
Kind of like that, I guess compared to that runner's high or whatever it is. So
yeah.
That's exactly what it was for that game. But yeah, I came home the next night and my mom, I think I slept till like 3:00 that next afternoon because I was so tired. And it felt like a whole day had passed. But.
Do you have any like memories that stand out to you from when you were playing that like you'll think about every now and then?
Yeah. I think about when we played Vanguard. Might have been my junior year. It was me and Cody, and it was kind of when we started figuring out what our offense was. Because our offense coordinator tried to get away from the fullback offense and he tried to go more spread and it just wasn't working. So we went back to fullback, and so I went back to fullback and I started, you know, being the lead blocker, ISO, power, you know, whatever, slice kind of deal. And it was just basically, you know, me and Cody just running up and down the field. Like I wasn't carrying the ball, but it was Cody, you know, I really took pride in trying to block for him and get him out and get him running. And so we took over Vanguard. We beat them at Vanguard. And then one of the other ones is when we played Kissimmee Osceola because they were a powerhouse and they still are to this day. And we went down there and we were down 14-0 at Kissimmee and they had a great defense that year. And we came back and we beat them 21-14. And you talk about, God, that was a battle. It was tough. I got lit up a few times in that game and I hit this one linebacker and he just laughed at me one time, like a brick wall. I was like, okay, this is great. And I still got a little scar on my neck from hitting the other guy because his belt buckle or his face mat or his chin strap buckle came off and it cut me. So that was a fun game. But yeah, you still have those little glimmering memories every now and then of them. They're like, yeah, that was fun. That was a good game.
Well, I imagine if you have a scar to show for it, it's hard to forget, right?
Yeah, definitely is.
That can be demoralizing too, like whenever you're going to hit a linebacker and it just doesn't flinch at all. That can be so demoralizing when you're on the field.
He was huge too. I mean, I was probably 200, I was probably about 200 pounds playing fullback. So it's not like I was some Mike Allstott running through there, but this guy was probably a good solid 240 on a 5'11", 6-foot frame. I just remember hitting him and he just grabbed me and moved me. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to bring everything to this dude every single time. And it was it was a little demoralizing, I'm not going to lie, but yeah, it was a fun game. Needless to say, at the end of the day, and you can't cut in high school, so you just got to take it and you got to go. So, but yeah.
Now, after high school, you went to play at Weber, didn't you?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How would you describe that experience?
It was eye-opening, to say the least. It was fun. I had a great time, actually. It's a really good college. It's, and I probably should have just stuck it out for a little longer and got a business degree out of there, but, you get tempted with some things, but, so we went down there and literally it was my starting backfield all went. So it was myself, our starting quarterback, Matt Leone, and Chris Ginyard. We all went down there together. So, which was kind of cool. But, it was interesting. You get down there and you find out, okay, you're a freshman. So you get the freshman treatment and this, that, and the other. And, it was a fun experience. I wouldn't change anything, except for the fact that I got way too many concussions, found out what a concussion was down there and didn't realize I had concussions until I learned what they were in college. I had a few in high school, but I never knew what they were. I just, back in the day, it was like, we just got dinged. Oh, okay, well, we're
Get
good.
your bell rung.
Yeah, just got my bell rung. We're fine.
Yeah.
And then I got down, so I get to Weber and, within 2 seasons I had 7. And, I was just, okay. And at the time, the or the Revos, or the Revolutions were the new helmet, at the time. And, they bought me this brand new $200-$300 helmet. And I kept popping the air bladders in the helmet because I'd leave with my forehead a little bit, my face mask. And so I would go head to head with some of these linebackers because I was like, no, I'm going to try and knock him out every time. So, that was my goal as a fullback. I'm going to bring the hit to him. He's not going to bring it to me. So I kept doing that. And, I definitely knocked myself out of my career, but that's fine. It was fine.
What was like was that sort of like an eye-opening experience that you were referring to, or was there something else too that kind of opened your eyes to something else?
Well, it just kind of gave me my first look at NAIA and their rules because when I was there, I had a 27-year-old tailback at one point. I'm 19 years old walking into this place, and the rules of NAIA are so much different than anybody else because when you stop, and I don't know if it's changed since then, but I know if you stop playing and you stop going to school, your clock just stops when you stop. So you can come back and start playing. So we had this one kid, I say kid, he was a grown man, named Tolson. And he ended up actually getting like a tryout with the Jaguars. He was just so massive. I don't know if he ever did anything with them, but I mean, he came in, he was bigger than his fullbacks, and I'm like, he looked like a Greek god. His shoulder were probably, he's broader than a doorway, and his waist was probably, I don't even know, it was tiny, but he'd line up a tailback and you're just like, okay, but, I'd have to tell him which way to go every time. But, other than that, he was impressive. But yeah, so that was kind of, interesting. And just in Florida in general, you had plenty of athletes that either didn't make it or didn't get the looks. And so we're playing with these guys, and it was interesting. It was a fun experience. It really was. I really enjoyed it. And our school was right here on a lake. So literally our dorms backed up right to a lakefront property, or like it was just lake. So you could just literally walk out of the dorms. We had a little beach area. So if you wanted to in your downtime, you just go lay on the beach, right there by the lake. And they always had a party at the end of the semester, and it was a really cool deal.
Yeah, it's a cool way to decompress after practice too.
Yeah, it was pretty neat, but myself and Matt were just so driven on wanting to play. So we'd go out there, we'd sneak out there in the middle of the night. We'd break out after curfew, go to the tennis courts, and we'd work on our exchanges, our openings, on our plays and stuff like that. We'd run little drills and stuff like that. It was funny. It was a good time.
Do you think people underestimate the talent that's in NAIA?
Absolutely. Absolutely they do. Cause and I think I did too until I got to here and I found out that some of those guys that come to junior colleges because they have to have the grades to get out. And we've had so many guys that were freaks that they didn't make the grades and they got to go because, regardless of where you go, you still got to do the work. You still got to try. You got to go to class. And those guys that didn't do it, they got to have a home somewhere,
Yeah.
And so we've had a few D linemen in the past, and I've probably had a DB or two that have gone on, and they've got to, they could have, if they do NAI, they would just tear it up because they're just such good players.
Yeah, I have a buddy that played D3 football at Alfred University up in New York, and I kind of was curious, and I asked him, sort of a similar question, do people underestimate football at like the D2, D3 level? And he said, we had plenty of guys that could have played D1, but for whatever reason, they chose to go to Alfred. So it's just crazy to think how, the talent level could be like so razor thin between any level, And
and a lot of it has to do with, oh, hey, that guy's not 6'4" and he's not 230 pounds, or hey, and we're doing our spring recruiting, so I'm going through and looking at rosters and I'm looking at film and everything like that. So you see all these guys, the average height of a lot of these guys that I'm looking at in North Florida are, maybe 6 foot. That's the average, and then, there's so many guys that are 5'8", 5'9", 5'10", that are 160 pounds, 155 pounds. And it's just like, yeah, they don't have the length everybody wants. They don't have the size. They don't have now obviously there's 5'9" and 5'10" guys that are going on, and clearly, but they're absolutely freaks and they're just tearing it up. So they demand your attention. So.
Yeah, you would figure like in the age of like the sub package that you could find a role for everybody if they have the athleticism, regardless of like their physical drawbacks.
Right.
So did you know that you wanted to be a coach like from the get-go?
I didn't. No, not initially. Once I found out my playing career was over, yeah, that's when I kind of transitioned. I was like, well, and that was kind of funny. I met, it was so funny. The guy that ended up being like a GA for us at Weber, Tony Pecoraro, he was a D coordinator at Southern Miss, and I can't think of where he landed now. We had talked the other day, but he landed again somewhere. And he was our GA at the time on defense, and he kind of gave me an option. He goes, hey, I can get you two things, because he knew I was going to leave and go to Florida State, because my brother was up in Tallahassee, and I was like, I'm going to just go up there, go to school, it's dream school, just at least finish it out. Because, they're sitting there telling me I better be careful, all these concussions. And he goes, well, I can get you one of two things. I can get you a student coaching job, or I can get you a walk-on spot at Florida State. He goes, you're athletic enough, you run, they'll let you be a walk-on and all that stuff. And at the time, it was the starting linebacking core was Ernie Sims, Buster Davis, and Lawrence Timmons. And you had Eric Church and Geno Hayes that were on the roster too. I'm like, you know what? I think I've had enough concussions. I don't think I want to do that anymore. I mean, I can't imagine going and hitting those guys in practice. And so I was like, I think I'll take the student coaching job. And so that was a great experience too. So.
Yeah, I'm a Steeler fan, so Lawrence Timmons stands out pretty well in my memory. And Troy Polamalu has always been kind of like the anchor of that defense, but there was a 2 or 3 year period where Timmons was the best player on that defense.
Oh, absolutely.
There was one year, it was like, must have been 2010 when T.O. was playing for the Bengals, and Lawrence Timmons is running down the field with him and picks off a pass. He's covering a wide receiver. That's incredible.
Oh yeah. Well, when he was at Florida State, he'd go play gunner on kickoff, or not kickoff, but I think he was on kickoff too, but he was on punt team. He'd line up as a gunner. And this is a linebacker. And people were just going, because they wanted to know who he was, because he was wearing 83. That was his number in college for a little bit. And I'm just like, who is this cat? Well, that's a linebacker. And he's flying down there and just smacking people. And I'll never forget, my first year there, Tebow was a freshman, and the Gators were just, oh God, they were chomping about Tebow and chomping about how great he is. And rightfully so, he ended up being a great guy and a great competitor and great all that. But he was a freshman, and he hadn't played against Lawrence Timmons yet. And so I think Timmons was very quiet, he doesn't say much. I think he kind of took it personally. I'll never forget it, man. He put Tebow down in that game. Tebow was trying to run, and Timmons was at the line and knocking him back, taking him. So he basically made Tebow nothing in our game. And so, Chris Lee and I think, who was it? There was another guy, and we lost to them by a step because Michael Ray Garvin, he was our punt returner, kick returner, and we had a kickoff taken back, and he literally stepped out maybe half an inch on the sideline, which would have been the game-winning touchdown for us. And they caught it, and they called it, and I was like, oh, you gotta be kidding me, because the entire Doak Campbell Stadium erupted, and we were like, we won, we just beat the Gators, this is awesome, blah, blah, blah. And then come to find out, the replay came back, and we're like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Just by half a step. It wasn't,
Game of inches.
Yes, no question.
So like, what was the hardest part about adjusting to like life as a coach? When you're obviously as a student coach, you're at the very bottom of the food chain. So like, what was hardest for you about assimilating to that part of the game coming from being a player?
Initially, cause you don't realize how much work is put into it, as a player or, depending, once you get up older and you're in college for a little longer, you understand what's going on. But, as a reg, when I was just a freshman, so I had no idea how much work went into this. I knew there was a lot of work, but I didn't know how much. And so we were basically doing GA work when I got to Florida State, and to the point where I remember I was, having lunch with a friend, and the coach that, one of the coaches texted me and said, hey, I need you at the office now. So it's like, all right, box it up, let's go. And so it was quite, that was interesting to see how much these coaches were at the office, and until, they're there at 7 a.m. and then they're not leaving till 10:30 at night, maybe even later, depending on. And then even if they go home, you still got work to do that you got to help them prep for tomorrow. So, it was all good stuff. I mean, it taught you, just the learning curve of it was probably the hardest thing, of just learning how much coaches put into, game plans, preparation, because, there's a lot of people still think, oh, college football coaching, they have it easy, or, because they think it's like high school, where there's a period in high school where they're getting off. Well, shoot, some coaches maybe, but the ones that are always constantly winning and pushing themselves and pushing their players, and they're getting them out, those guys work year round. They don't stop. There's off-season weights, there's conditioning, there's training. There's just so much to it that, the general consumer of football never sees. And, and even some of the players, because once you're done with practice as a player and you're done with your meetings, you go back home and you work on, studying, classes, tests, quizzes, papers. You don't see that the coaches are still there till 10:30 at night, unless you have a late night meeting or whatnot, so.
Yeah, football is definitely like that sport that has that obsessive quality to it. I mean, if you're someone who obviously dedicates yourself to being a coach, you often kind of see, and you don't find it really too much in other sports, but these guys really just, eat, sleep, and drink football 24/7. It's amazing.
Oh yeah. You're right. They can get obsessed with it, but at some point you gotta pump the brakes at some point and just, and be like, okay, take a step back, because at some point it becomes overkill and it becomes too much. And when you get overloaded like that, then normally you're trying to overload your kids, and then your kids are being like, whoa, coach, this is, you're trying to pile to them. And so it's just, you got to recognize when enough is enough, and when it's overkill and when it's not, there is a fine line with that.
How did you find that line? Was there like one instance where you said, okay, I need to learn to separate my life and football?
Absolutely. You kind of really find out when, you become a dad. I've just been recently blessed with a son. He's about to be 2 in July. And man, there's days where it's just like, I just wanted to get home and see my kid. So it's just a race. But as far as like the football coaching aspect of it, there's been times where I've, cause I was absolutely a grinder, I would stay up till, I don't even know. There was, a big rivalry week. I was up to the office one night till 3 a.m., and just drawing routes, making sure I knew everything. And then I'm sitting there and and then I'm trying to translate all this stuff to these kids. And I'm trying to tell them, hey, on this one, when he does this, he does the short motion, it's this. And when he does this, it's that. And then while you may grasp it, they don't grasp it. You got to remember that you've been doing this a whole lot longer than they have. And, your knowledge is probably going to be far superior than what their knowledge is, and they're still learning. And there's a period where you can overload them, and then they can't think, and then they can't process it, and they can't play fast. And it's just like, okay, I can't push him. I can't dump all this on him. I can't give him all this. So I give him the main points he needs to understand, okay, if they move to this formation, we got to check here. They got to do this, they go there. And then that's where we as coaches got to be, we're supplemental at that point. Hey, watch this. When we see that guy trigger, or we see that guy's alignment, or we see that he's light on his hand, we have to help them supplementally there, because eventually they will get it, if they continue to study and train and learn. But, that's where our job has to be. Okay, give them this much, and then eventually let them go, and then they'll eventually be able to grasp the whole thing. But overload them too early can fry them and burn them out too. So that's part of it.
Yeah, sort of like a paralysis by analysis.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Was Bobby Bowden was the coach when you were at Florida State, right?
Yes, he was.
Did he ever give you any like words of advice when you were going on in your career?
No, not really, because Coach Bowden was, he probably knew who I was. He just probably didn't know my name. Mm-hmm. He was, for the most part, he was in his office, like, a lot. Like, he'd be watching film. He'd be in there watching his film, and like, you never realize how much crap a head coach has to do. And at that point in time, Coach Bowden, I still remember they had those big, mail carts, full of stuff, and just full of footballs and autograph paraphernalia, all that stuff, that literally he had to sign every single one of them. And so like and I'm looking at these big ass mail cards, and I'm thinking, that's got to at least take 2 or 3 hours for him to sign all that stuff. And that's just, all the crap he had to go through. So like, he never really got a chance to leave his office. He had his he had an 8 a.m. meeting with his staff meeting, which I wasn't always there for because obviously it was for the full-time coaches and the GAs. And then we were always in class anyway at that point in time. So he would have a meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning. Then he would have a meeting at 1 o'clock after lunch. And they talk about, they did their daily devotional in the morning, and then they did, and then probably did some recruiting, I think, in the morning, and then the afternoon was all getting practice scheduled and what they wanted to do, all that, and then go from there. But, you see him in passing, he'd be, hey, buddy, that's basically Coach Bowden at the time. But that was about it. I mean, my guys that I always interacted with were Coach Andrews and Coach Steele and, Coach Jody Allen and, James Colsey, who's now coaching. He was a GA at the time, who's now coaching in Canada. I think St. Mary's is where he coaches now. And then you had Odell Higgins, who he was the card, man. He was so funny sitting there. He's been doing it for so long, but he was such a cut up. And so knows exactly what he's talking about. But just when the staff was there, I mean, he was always cracking wise and cracking jokes and making things funny. So,
was there anything that you learned from him just through observation, the way he conducted practice, or I guess just his overall approach to the job?
I mean, the great thing about Coach Bowden is he was never really a micromanager. He did, I guess, to a respect, but he let his coaches coach, which was the nice thing. So when he hired you, okay, I'm not going to sit there and be over your shoulder every second of the day. He let his coaches coach, and when it came to practice, he was letting Coach Andrews, that was Coach Andrews' baby. Coach Andrews was in charge of how the practices were run and how we did things. And I think that's what led to so many of those, the toughness factor of Florida State for the longest time, is because Coach Andrews is he's cut from, Bear Bryant, he played for Bear Bryant. So he's cut from that similar cloth, and just, it was funny. I was listening to, Deion Sanders' podcast the other day, and he was talking about Coach Andrews and how he built himself off of that. And I'll tell you what, when he's on the field, he's a different dude. I mean, it's night and day personality. It's like a different split personality. It's like when he came out of the locker room, his face was already beet red, and he's walking out to the practice field. He's just going, because that was his responsibility. So he was all charged up about it. But man, you get back in the office and Coach Andrews turns into Grandpa Andrews. He's the nicest dude you've ever met, super quiet, doesn't say much, and he was probably one of the coolest dudes you ever met. So.
Yeah, some guys just have that switch where they can go from game face to being normal.
Absolutely that dude. He is absolutely that dude.
So how did you make the jump over to Butler?
So after Florida State, I went to Valdosta State. I got a GA job there. And so I was there for about 3 years. And then I was actually thinking about getting out of the coaching game for a minute, because it's like trying to find a job was just so hard.
Really?
And then we had a safety that had came, Harrison Dreiling came from Butler to us. And we had another guy that came to us, Ryan Schrader, who ended up playing for the Falcons. He was a Butler guy too. So I got to coach Harrison for a little bit. I was a GA, so I got to work with him and coach a little bit. And so I was talking to him one day. He goes, well, hell, the DB job just came open at Butler. He said, I know the D coordinator really well. Do you want me to put your name in? I said, yeah, dude, absolutely. So Harrison reached out to who is now our head coach, Tim Schaffner. And, I'll never forget the response. He goes, yeah, we got 200 resumes. What's one more? So I was like, well, this is great. They got 200. So, all right. So that's fine. So, but it just kind of goes to show you this is, it's a who business. And so, I got on the phone with the head man, Troy Morrill, who is a legend, when it comes to junior college coaching and everything. We talked, I think, the first day for about half an hour or so, just in general. And then I talked to the Schaffner the next day for half an hour or so on the phone. And then Coach Morrill the next day again, talked to him for about 30 minutes or so. He goes, well, we'd like to get you out here for an interview. Okay. And so get on a plane, go all the way out there. I stayed there for it was like a 2-day process, So I stayed the night, ended up staying at Coach Morrill's house with his family, which great family. His daughter just graduated high school now. When I met her, she was just this tiny little thing. She was adorable. She was, probably the first friend I made at Butler outside Coach Morrill. And then at the second day, and the nice thing was Coach Morrill actually picked me up from the airport. It wasn't just some GA or what, it was him. He came and picked me up, brought me in. And so that's how I got to, Butler.
That's encouraging whenever he picks you up, I can imagine.
Yeah. Well, I was taken back. I was like, man, the headman's actually picking me up. This is kind of weird, like, cause you think, you've seen how D1 guys do it, and you've done it because you're a GA. You're like, okay, well, I'm going to go get this guy from the airport and bring him back. And so the fact that the headman picked you up, it was like, okay, well, that's interesting. You're almost just like, okay, so, you're riding in the car and you're like, I don't know what to do with my hands. I'm just kind of a little nervous already, just kind of talking to him, and you didn't know what to expect because you think you'd have a GA or somebody that could pick you up and you'd be like, okay, well, I can kind of pick his brain about, what's the headman like? What's this guy like? And just kind of really get, but I mean, he's as genuine as he was in the car, and Coach Schaffner's the same way. So.
Yeah, there's definitely those moments where you're microanalyzing every single last word you say. You don't want to sound like an idiot.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, so it's just everything's on your best behavior. And like, I literally sat there and I had buddies that were telling me at the time, oh, you got to get a suit, man. You got to get a suit. And I'm like, a suit? I was like, okay, you're a broke college kid. You don't suit. What are you talking about, a suit? But that's what these D1 guys were doing. So you go get a suit and all that. And so I just said, all right, Coach Morales, he kind of touched base on it. He goes, look, hey, we're very casual out here. You don't need to get a suit. You don't need to be suited up or anything like that. He goes, just dress comfortable, casual, and we'll be fine. So, now obviously you take that with a grain of salt. So I was out there in some nice slacks and a nice shirt, the first day and everything like that. And I realized it's as casual as, because I think he might have had flip flops on and he was in shorts and he had a nice little Grizzly polo on, but like he wasn't super dressed up. And our head coach now, Coach Schaffner, he is no slave to fashion. He is very, very, he is very relaxed and comfortable. So when he came in, I was like, okay, I might be a tad bit overdressed, but that's okay. That makes sense. So it was fine. It was very pleasing to see that they were very casual, laid back, because that's kind of how I am. I'm a jeans and t-shirt guy. I'm ball cap. That's my comfortable spot. So.
Yeah, there's always the coach that just really doesn't care what he wears at all.
Right.
Even if other people are dressed casually, he takes it to a whole new level.
Yeah, that's him. That's him. And it's funny because he's great. He's a brilliant mind. It's just, and normally that's what it borders on. You have some kind of brilliance somewhere, and he's brilliant when it comes to defense, and so like he just doesn't care. He's just comfortable and he just relaxes. So it's pretty neat.
So in the world of like community college football, right? It's like most people, I think, when they think of it, they get they probably think of Last Chance U.
Yes.
Yeah. I've only seen the first season and I liked it, but I'm curious to hear, as someone who's like associated with it, who's right in the middle of it, like, would you say like your experience has been similar to what you see on that, or do you think it's kind of on a school by school basis?
We don't see that at all. Honestly, our culture is way different. And honestly, Netflix approached Coach Morrill back in the day and he's turned it down. He turned it down and we've turned it down since then. They've kept coming to us. They wanted to come see us. And we sat there and go, look guys, you're going to be bored, because our biggest issues are kids not going to class or kids, miss the study hall or, whatever. I said, we don't have these, cause we'd run them out, if they were total prima donnas. And obviously, you discipline them and you push them and, you get them going, but we didn't have all these huge issues that, like Independence was having where players would skip practice or this, that, and the other, or, getting in fights with coaches, stuff like that. We don't have that, and that's, that's not who we are and that's not what we're going to do. And it's just like, well, look, either you're here to play football and go to school and this is, you want to go to Division I. Okay. Well, this is what you got to do. And all this other stuff is just, no, we don't need it. So either do what you said you came to do and do this, or, there's several other junior colleges you can go to and we'll help you. And that's the other thing. We're not that group that if a kid can't cut it, we're just like, all right, well, you're on your own. We help try and find those kids homes to go to, whether it's in the JUCO, whether it's a NAIA program, D2, D1, whatever. We'll try and help those kids get out as long as, they don't try and put a black eye on the program, just like anything else.
But like for you as a coach, do you find it I guess maybe not frustrating because if you've been in it long enough, obviously you know how the game is played, but seeing that guys are constantly trying to move up to go somewhere else, do you kind of find that you have limitations on how you approach your job, that if you want to kind of start doing some certain schemes with players that are going to be there for a while, you can't really do because you have players coming and going? Or do you just do your thing and whoever's there you work with?
I mean, you recruit to what your scheme is a lot of times. And, like this year was a, it depends on what you have to change it and adapt it to each group, because sometimes, they could be doing great in high school, but then you're teaching them new techniques and they just can't get it. In high school, some of those guys were, hey, go lock that guy up and, don't worry about anything else. So they've never been taught true man. They're just like, okay, well, I'm the best athlete on the field. I can go lock that guy up and I don't have to worry about anything. So they have zero technique. They have zero fundamentals. And so when you start teaching them fundamentals and technique, they're like, wait, what? And it doesn't process for them. So, and some of these guys, it's just like, okay, so this year we weren't a great man team. This year, we can still run some man here and there, but, it's not like years past where, 75% of the snaps we were taking, were in man coverage. So this year is more, we were in cover 3. So we were really good in cover 3. That was our base, and so a lot of it was cover 3, and then we stayed in zone a lot. So it all depends on, some kids will grab zone better. Some kids grasp man better, and so you just kind of try and do your best to adapt. We don't have a huge playbook or anything like that. We have about, I don't know, probably 12 or 13 different coverages we could run at any given point in time. And then you just kind of tailor it down to what they're great at and go from there. So
how would you describe your defensive philosophy? Because obviously you adapt, but I mean, do you have certain principles that you want to abide by?
Yeah, we're aggressive. We're going to heat up the quarterback, and that's on our defense. That's never going to change. As long as, our head coach is still the defense coordinator and he does everything. He's never going to change that attack philosophy. Like, okay, I'm going to put pressure on you and see if you can handle it. And once that quarterback's been hit a few times, his demeanor changes, depending on, and every now and then you'll find a guy that his demeanor doesn't change and you're like, okay, well now it's a real fight. We had a quarterback we played in, 13 at Highland. Man, he was really good. We hit him a few times here and there, and I mean, they were really good about getting the ball out quick. And man, he was a rock star. And then the first game we played him, and then we figured out how their blocking scheme was going. And then his tune changed the second time we played him in the playoffs. At the time we had playoffs back then, and we played them and we sacked him 13 times in that second game. So, I mean, but he took it in, and you gotta tip your hat to those kids that can just sit there and take it, and take those shots. And so, because it's not an easy job when somebody's barreling down on you and you got some 300-pound D lineman that's about to hit you and you have to stare down the barrel and chuck that thing. So, but defensively, we're going to heat them up and see if they can handle pressure, and that's, and we've done that with several quarterbacks that have gone on to FBS level and done some good things, and it always works. If you can get pressure on them, it changes how they feel and it changes their comfortableness in that pocket. So,
yeah, as much as it's cool to watch the mobile running quarterbacks, it's always great to see someone just duck their shoulder when pressure's coming and just step up in the pocket and launch it. I think that's why Tom is still fun to watch, because he's in a lot of ways he's still a throwback even though he's still playing.
Absolutely. Yeah, he is. He's still got that old school mentality, I mean, well, he's still part of the old school, he came from the old school. So, I mean, what is he, 43 now, 44? It's amazing watching him play. So.
Do you think also coming from, since you've been in college your entire coaching career, has it been easier for you to kind of keep up with trends on offense in terms of the spread and, guys trying to get out in space? Because it seems like some guys for a while didn't really know how to respond appropriately, but then defenses, I think, in some way started catching up. So how did you kind of adjust your philosophy to keep pace with the offensive side of the ball?
The biggest change was because for the longest time, we only played a little bit of man, when I first got here. And so everything was zone. But when the RPO game came back into it, because zone read's one thing, the zone read was never really attacking you downfield. They had the zone read bubble and they had the zone read hit. So, that's just, for us, that was just perimeter runs. So we were like, okay, well, that can be stopped with cover 2. That can be stopped with, loose quarters, whatever you want to call it. And so that's not an issue. But when the RPO game came and they're starting to attack right at the linebacker level because little run fake, and they have to honor that run fake, and then they were just dunking them behind it. Now that changed everything. So we had to start progressing and go, it was kind of like a bastard version of man free is what we did.
Okay.
Where you can just take away. So the linebackers can play fast, and then you have a safety right there that can drive on that slant and go take that guy out right now. So, and it's kind of okay, you may get the ball, you may complete it. It's kind of like a bait, but understand your receiver's going to get drilled on this play. So, and we'll see how much he wants to keep taking that shot and keep taking that shot, keep taking that shot. And, when we put that defense in, we ended up that year. It was really impressive. I had no idea. I don't pay attention to our stats and what we do defensively. As long as we're focused on what we need to do. And I'm pretty quick as soon as that last game's over, I don't even think about it anymore until next season, and I move on to the next one. But our head, we always do interviews at the end of the season with our head coach, and he pulls in and goes, did you realize that season it was like 17? Because, we only gave up about on average 97 yards a game passing. And I said, what? And he's like, yeah. He said, wow. So it was impressive. We were the number one passing defense in the country. But, you think about under 100 yards a game on average, it was just stupid. You couldn't believe it. Just stupid video game numbers. And I was like, wow, that was impressive. But so that's what we did. And it's impressive. It works. So now obviously years in the league, they start to figure out what you do and how to do this and that. But if you're pretty good in man, you can play bump and run coverage on the edge, and we can apply pressure on that quarterback. It makes things a little bit more difficult. He's got to force that ball out. You can kind of predict what routes they're going to run. It's either going to be a slant, it's going to be a hitch, or it's going to be a fade, because he's not going to have time to sit back there and hold it. So there's only a few select routes they can run when you're applying that pressure. So, and if you can get your kids to understand that, it's going to be a good deal. It's going to be a good deal for you.
Do you coach the entire defensive backfield?
Yeah, I oversee all of it. We got a corners coach, now, and the past couple of years they have, which is nice because teaching man to teaching off man and teaching press man, there's similarities, but there's different techniques, and you got to be able to, and that just takes so much time to do. So, I have a guy that helps me out in the secondaries. Right now it's, Mathis Thomas, great guy. He's from Orlando originally. He's our corners coach. He's a ball of energy, and he helps and he takes over the corner. So, that first year he got here, naturally you got to kind of talk to him, show him, hey, this is what we do. This is that. And then, once he got it, it's like, okay. And you just watch him handle it and run with it. It's like, cool, perfect. I don't have to worry about that anymore. He's got that. And now, I'll still oversee it and look at some things and say, hey, this guy needs to step up, but he's running it great right now. So I don't have to worry about the corners at all, which is a huge, it helps. It just frees me up more time to coach those safeties, and get their eyes right, get them in the right position, because there's just so much more reads and checks and adjustments that our safeties have to make in the secondary, because our safeties make all the adjustments with the coverages. So that's their job. So anytime there's a motion, anytime there's a check, anytime there's a specific formation, they're the ones that have to adjust it all. So, so I can get to spend more time with them. We can get a little bit more intricate, not too much to overload them, but we can get to, hey, let's go ahead and check to this and make sure we're lined up here. Hey, get him right, move him over, just stuff like that. So, which is nice. So
are there like certain, I don't know, I guess like cardinal rules or maybe traits that a safety should have or needs to have to be successful regardless of what kind of scheme they're playing in?
I think so, honestly. It depends on who you ask and how good the high school coaches are at teaching them and whatnot. And, cause in some high schools it's just like, okay, just sit the post and read the quarterback. Well, you can do that when there's only one great player on that offense and they only got one passing threat. You can literally sit there and sit at the post and basically where that ball is going. You can just watch the quarterback. And a lot of those guys have gotten away with that. They just stare at the quarterback all day. And some coaches can teach you how to read the quarterback. I'm not one of those guys. Our head's going to be on a swivel. We're going to read routes, read releases, and once you identify what the concept is, now you have an idea of where you need to be. And then you can get your eyes back and look at the quarterback and see where he's looking, see if he's looking at our side or who can you rob and where you need to be. But as far as the safety goes, our defense, I always tell our guys, you can't be a dummy in our secondary because you're responsible for getting everybody lined up. So I like, intelligent safeties. I like guys that can grasp when I'm grabbing them. So like I look at, smarts is one thing, and, school smarts is different than regular football smarts, obviously. So in the recruiting process, you want to talk to these guys and find out, okay, how much ball do they know? Can they grasp what we're talking about? And so you just kind of pick their brain a little bit and just see how much ball they actually know. And obviously when you want to play man, you got to have a guy that can run and that's athletic and can play man coverage. So, that's what we primarily look for.
Do you feel like kind of like football smarts is kind of what's most missing when you get, people coming in?
Yeah. Right now I would say there is a lot of guys and it's just it's a weird time, because obviously the guys that have and I'm not saying it's everybody, but there's a lot of guys that, don't have what we call football acumen. They just have no concept of what football really is, or how to, they're just out there playing. They're not thinking about things. They're just either they've been the best athlete in their high school and they can just run over people or they can just do this, but they're not actually thinking about the game itself. So we're getting an influx of that. And I think everybody is, where you have to literally break it down to the smallest. Hey, this is A gap. This is B gap. This is C gap. Hey, this is cover 2. This is cover 1. This is cover 3. This is where you got to be. These are where you're vulnerable. These are the areas where you have to do. And, this is why we check the release of number 1, because if he gives me an outside release, I know he's either going to run a fade or a comeback. If he runs inside, well, he can only run a post, a curl, a dig. He can run an under route. He can run a slant. I know based on what he runs, where he's, his release tells me everything, so, and a lot of these guys, either they don't get coached that or they don't pay attention to it because it's it's not their phone. It's not in their phone. So,
right. Yeah.
So that's the challenge nowadays, is just kind of to try and you basically have to reteach the whole game to them, which is not, terrible, because it's kind of nice because then they don't necessarily always have bad habits when you have to reteach things and then they go, oh, well, that makes sense. Okay, well, good. Then we can go.
It kind of sharpens your knowledge too of it.
Absolutely. Well, because you're constantly reteaching it, and that's the nice thing. And then there's been times where I sat there and go, God, you'll say something and not even think about it and you go, huh, God, that makes so much more sense now that I said it like that than I've been saying it over the years. So you get to refine how you teach these guys. So it's it's a neat deal. It's a neat process because it just makes you better as a coach because you just continue to, you kind of keep teaching yourself as it goes along, which is really nice.
Is there like a safety that you always recommend your players to watch if they want to get better?
Well, I always tell them get off YouTube.
Get off YouTube?
I tell them to get off YouTube and stop looking at all these guys in the NFL, and then there's all these prophets of how to play man coverage and all this, that, and the other, or how to do this, how to do that, because there's just so many guys that are out there that are, supposed gurus and stuff like that. It's like, look, man, that's great for whatever scheme he's teaching. That's not boiling up to what we're teaching, and we're teaching to do it this way and play with this technique and try and do this. I have no idea what he's teaching you. And some of them are sound and some of them are very unsound. I've seen some, it's like, don't listen to that guy. But the guys that, for the corners, it was, for the longest time, it was Patrick Peterson. They wanted to watch Patrick Peterson and all this stuff. And Pat Peterson's always got a false step right at the beginning. So he backs himself off. Well, they don't think of, well, Pat, he always steps forward before. Yeah, but he's also, number one, he's a freak athlete. He's just an absolute freak. And, he could be one of those players that go out there and just play on ability and, which he doesn't, but he could if he wanted to. But what they're not seeing is that Pat Peterson's off by a whole another yard and a half, so he can offset that false step, and so we're trying to explain that to him. And all these kids want to just kind of run up there and get jammed up right at the line of scrimmage. It's like, no, you got to have reaction time. You got to be able to read what he's doing. So we tell him to get off YouTube. I tell guys, the fun ones I always used to say, I always go to the guys that Brian Dawkins was always a good one to go watch. As far as him, and I like teaching our guys to look at Ed Reed now. So look, Ed Reed's an absolute freak, but you look at how Ed Reed would study film and how he was a true student of the game. And there's some other guys obviously that are true students of the game that, and there's a film breakdown the NFL is doing now, and they put some episodes on. Somebody's put episodes of it on YouTube where it's like film session breakdowns.
Mm-hmm.
You see, guys like Melvin Gordon. There's Buda Baker was a fun one to watch, and so they literally get them in there and they're watching film. And it's funny, you sit there and you watch. I tell our guys, go watch all these guys. And they talk about what they're doing, and they're breaking down exactly why they did this and why they did that, and like just the infinite amount of film study they did that took to understand, hey, I knew from film study that he was going to do this and he was going to do that. And I tell them, go watch. I say, these guys that are in the NFL, they're not stupid. I mean, they're not just out there playing on athletic ability alone. They're studying film, they're watching these guys, and they're sharp, there's no dummies in the NFL league. There's just not, at a safety position or a DB position, and so we watch those all the time with our guys, and I said, so they can hear it from a different perspective. But yeah, those are the guys that, and there's tons of them, Mika Fitzpatrick's on one of them, and, Xavier Rhodes, and all these guys are on there. So it's good for them because a lot of these guys they look up to, and these are legends. This is where they want to be. And so they get to watch that. So I tell them to watch those episodes, but not all the highlights and stuff like that.
Right. Did you ever see the Ed Reed video where it was a playoff game again? I don't know if it was a playoff game, but he was going against Peyton Manning, mm-hmm. and he was talking about how they would run this route where someone in the slot would go up the seam, and then they would have a post route. And basically he was trying to get Ed Reed to follow the seam and then hit the post.
Yeah.
But Ed
got it. Yeah.
Yeah. So Ed goes with the seam, but trying to trick Payne to think he's going that way, but then he reverses and picks off the pass on the post. I mean, it's in that kind of like film study. And obviously you need that sort of athleticism to go along with it, but you get to see the way the guy is able to dissect and kind of beat Payne at his own game was incredible.
Yes. And that's what it turned into. And I used to love watching those games growing up. With Ray Lewis and Ed Reed, and they go against Peyton, and then you talk about how many checks were made at those line of scrimmage. Peyton would check to something, then you see Ray going up there and shifting people and moving them, and I mean that was a chess match, man. It was fun to watch those games, and you just sit there and just go, wow. Those types of games are fun to watch.
Oh yeah, that's why I used to love watching the New England Colts games.
Yep.
I mean, it was always Brady versus Manning, but watching Manning going against that defense, because that defense never finished probably top 5 in terms of like statistics. Well, maybe a couple times, but they were always versatile, and they always had like the play when you needed it, and they were just like they would shift and just make Payne go nuts at times. Oh yeah, absolutely. So I mean, it was that Patriots defense was pretty sick. It was pretty good. But yeah, I'll always be a Ray Lewis fan though. That dude's fun to watch. He was always fun to watch. Yeah, he was an animal. So like, what is your like end goal? I mean, have you thought about what you want to do in the profession, what you want to accomplish?
I mean, yeah, obviously, you sit there and I've been at this level. You think about things. It's like D1's always a fun dream to think about and go and do that. And that would be nice. Do I want to be a D1 coordinator one day? I don't know. Maybe that'd be fun, but depends on where you're at. But at the same time, being here, it's like I have a life and I enjoy my life, and I love my son. I love my wife. I love being able to spend some time with them, which is awesome, and I wouldn't trade that for, I don't think, any job to where I would never see them or barely see them ever, I like, I'd love to get an FCS job. I think that would be a lot of fun too. Not that they don't work or anything like that, but I'd love to get on. I think that level would be the next one I would try and jump to if I could. And then, FBS is FBS. And if you can get on there, that'd be great. And just for experience, but, I don't know. We'll see. It'll be good to see. I mean, I got friends that are FBS. I got a buddy that I was a GA with. He's now the running backs coach at Michigan State. And we've talked a few times about, he gets a job somewhere and he's like, yeah, I got you. And that's not a problem. And, but I mean, it's just a matter of time and opportunity. And if somebody gets a job that and if they need you, they need you. If they don't, then it is what it is at that point. But
Would you try to be a coordinator at the FCS level?
Eventually I think it would be fun to try and just go and do, but there's a lot of work that goes with it. And, I understand that. I'm afraid to work by any means, but yeah, I think at FCS level would be fun to try and be a coordinator at that level and go from there. So.
Cool, man. Well, do you want to tell people where they can follow you, where they can kind of like get any of your, ideas about football, anything like that?
I'm on Twitter. It's just, it's Buko_Tensky. That's TINSKI. Just kind of a little thing I've created with our players and stuff like that. So, but yeah, that's me. It's a little skull with wings. I'm a big Avenged Sevenfold fan. So it's basically that little death bat with a little purple hue on it. That's my picture. So don't get scared off if that's what you see. But yeah, I'm always down to talk with anybody and everybody about, I like talking ball. I can sit there all day and just talk about ball and, get on the whiteboard and do stuff like that. So yeah.
Good stuff, man. Well, dude, I'm glad you decided to come on the show, man. Really fun talking to you.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, man. We had a good time. I appreciate it.
I'm glad, man. You take it easy, all right? Best of luck.